Welcome back, Zach. This is a talk about your country, the United States of America, often called America. And there are many, many things to talk about the U.S. But the most important part, actually two parts. The first one is America was established as an experiment. Now, my own term for United States is an ongoing great social experiment. And what does the experiment consist of? Well, it consists of several things. Number one, it consists of a country built on ideas, not on race, religion, creed, built on ideas. And the second one, because it was built on ideas, it's a very exceptional country. There's no other country like the United States. Why? Because number one, as I mentioned, it was built on ideas, and secondly, it's built on immigrants from many parts of the world. Now, there's two kinds of immigrants. There's what you call legal immigrants and what you call illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants are people that are trying to steal into the United States and then stay there and live there so they won't be deported. So what is the background of the United States? Well, the United States is part of what you call the Western tradition or the Western civilization. And in your classes, you heard about stuff going way back to Athens and Greece and then going through Rome and then going into Western Europe and then particularly going into England and then from England going into the United States. So what is the basic source of the beginning of the United States? Well, there was a competition between Netherlands, France, England, Spain, Sweden, and Denmark for North America. And several of them are just small countries that weren't very important. The big three are Spain, France, and England. And so the United States is very much based upon England. The first settlers that came, that stayed and developed into the United States were from England. And you heard about the Puritans and the Pilgrims and all these other people. But before that, they had people living here. And there's two ways you can call them. You can call them American Indians, or you can call them Native Americans. Now, you are a Native American because the first meaning of Native American or Native anybody is a person that's born in that country, is a native. The second thing is, in the United States, you also have what you call naturalized citizens. That means people who are born in another country and come to America and become citizens in America. So, America, as I mentioned, is exceptional for several reasons. Another reason is it is a very large country and it is very, very beautiful. I myself have been in 49 states, and I've been in Canada, and I've been in Mexico. That's called North America. I've also been in South America, and Europe, and Asia, and Africa, and Pacific, and Caribbean. One place I've not gone is I've not gone to Antarctica, because I'm not interested in penguins. So I want to talk about America. So America started, and it started basically as 13 colonies. And in 1790, after America was established as a country in 1789, 90% of the people were from England, 90%. Now, the number has gone down a lot, but the first settlers very much were English and Germans, but you also had other people there. So, what you have in the United States is a very large country of 49 and now 50 states, and It's mainly on what you call the continental United States, except for Alaska, which is off from the main part, and also Hawaii. Then you have other parts of America. For example, you have American territories, like Guam is American territory in the Pacific, and you have Puerto Rico, or in Spanish, Puerto Rico, which became American. You have some other small parts of America. So, to be an American citizen is a vast privilege. And you should thank your mother and father that you were born in America, because you too could become president eventually. Because the first requirement is you must be a native-born citizen, and secondly, you have to be above a certain age. If I remember, I think it's something like 35. So there's a lot of argument going on. Now, in terms of the United States, the country was established basically on several ideas. And a lot of the philosophical ideas came out of Greece, old Athens, and came out of England. And there was a man called John Locke, and he was an Englishman back in the 1600s, if I remember correctly. And when America was started, the idea of government was divine rule of kings. And that meant that you had a ruler under various names, kings and prince and emperors, and they were the intermediary between God and the people. So God would tell the king what to do, and the king would tell the people what to do. Well, America sort of took that and turned it upside down. In the United States, it became more the people would tell the government what to do. This is what you call popular sovereignty. Now, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, which is a very famous document, it starts off, "We the people." We the people, meaning Americans. And then we also have a constitution. This is government now. Now, the founding fathers, meaning the people that set up the government, this is back in the 1780s. There was a famous conference in 1787. And this was called the Constitutional Conference. And they basically decided to change the 13 colonies that had defeated Britain in the American Revolutionary War. And they were 13 nations then, and they decided to come together, combine into one country. And so they had a lot of ideas, and many of the ideas were taken from Britain. Britain is England and Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and also Rome and Athens. It goes back way time ago, Socrates and that, roughly around 400 BC. And so in the United States, instead of having a divine ruler, a king, or an emperor, they decided to have a government with a president. And so you had three parts of the government. You had the executive, which means the president and his people, and then you had the legislature, which means Congress, the House of Representatives, and then the Senate. And then you had the judiciary, which means the judges. And at the top of that was Supreme Court. And the basic idea was you have checks and balances, which means you had three parts of the country, part of the government, and they were sort of to check and balance each other. And the reason was to prevent a dictator or a king arising. Because when George Washington, the first president, decided not to continue after 2 terms, people wanted him to continue. Before that, they argued about whether he should be King George, and he said no. So he did his 8 years in Washington. At that time, the government was in Philadelphia. It didn't go into Washington, D.C. until about 1800. And he turned back to his farm, his plantation. He died in 1799. The second idea of the founding fathers was the idea of federalism, which means the political power and legal power was divided between Washington, D.C., the national government there, for all states, and right now it's 50, versus the individual state governments. And some things were national and some things were state. And so when they decided to come together, the 13 colonies that became countries, states become one country, there was a big argument. And the big argument was between the big states versus the small states. We're talking about 13 states on the East Coast. And the small states wanted to maintain some independence. And so they set up a system. And the system was of the popular vote in all of the states, and then you had the electoral college. And the states would have their votes together, and then would have a total. And then you would have members from each state would come to Washington and vote. They were called electors. And the electoral college was important. And I repeat again, the small states did not want to lose power and be nominated by the large states. That is why we have the system of the electoral college determining the president. And so sometimes you have a popular vote will go one way, and the electoral college will vote to go the other way. Now this right now is the same way it is at the time I'm making this video with President Trump. Won the electoral college. And again, that's the system of federalism, to divide power between the national government and the states. So the U.S. has a constitution, and the U.S. Constitution is one of the oldest constitutions. And the Constitution basically is the law of the United States. And as you have new states coming in, they are accepted and U.S. becomes larger, up now to 50 states. And so the basic idea is you have a lot of discussion and debate. This is called argument. And the idea through discussion and debate, you have people finding out what they want to do, because not everyone is perfect. And you want to put forth your ideas and listen to other people's and then decide. So conflict is built into the United States. This is why you have conflict all over the states, between the president and the state governors, and between the president and Congress, and between the executive and fighting the legislative and all this. And then finally, a group of people, 9 people, decide what's going to be the law. And who are these people? They're called the Supreme Court. That means they're judges that live in Washington, D.C., and they finally decide what the law is. Now, what is the purpose of the politicians? Obviously, the politicians are to govern. So there's 2 parts. One is to try to be elected, and you say a lot of things, and you say a lot of promises which you don't do or cannot do. And secondly, you govern. But then eventually you have a group of people decide, and you make the decision roughly by 5-4, or 6-3, or 7-2. Sometimes unanimous, 9-0. And it takes time, because this is what we call a democracy. But technically, the United States is a democratic republic. A republic means you have people that elect one person to represent them in Washington, because you cannot have right now roughly about 328 million people at this time all go into Washington and argue. It's impossible. So people call the United States a democracy, but technically it is not a democracy. It is a democratic republic, which means an indirect democracy. And the U.S. is the oldest and the most successful of democracies. We have been in existence since 1789, which is over 200 years. And the Constitution has what we call amendments. There are 27 amendments. That means changes or additions to the Constitution, which are also considered to be part of law. So the question is, what is the law in the United States? The answer is very simple. The law is the Constitution of the United States. And this is set by the people. So there is a question here. And the question is, who does the U.S. belong to? Does it belong to the people that are in Washington, D.C., the politicians and the bureaucrats? Does it belong to the states and the governors of the 50 states and the 50 states legislative assemblies? Again, each one has representatives and Senate. Who does the country belong to? Well, the answer is very simple. In the Declaration of Independence, it says, we the people. This is why we have elections. And elections are every 4 years nationally. For senators, elections are every 6 years, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then we also have the House of Representatives every 2 years. So basically, this is what I'm saying. The founding fathers, these are the people that from the 13 colonies at that time, starting in 1775, with the American Revolutionary War against Britain. Britain had the most powerful army and navy in the world at that time. And so you had a bunch of rebels fighting. And the reason the rebels won, American rebels won the war is because France came in. America could not have done it without France. Then after the war, eventually Britain and the United States become allies because they have the same Judeo-Christian heritage with some additions, and you have a lot of people coming in. And so when the immigrants came in, they tried to become Americans because they were in America. So the idea is to become American citizen, which means you spoke English and you followed the basic American ideas. This is what you call the majority culture. There's also the subcultures. Subculture, which means you maintain connection with your ancestral home, meaning where your ancestors came from. Your parents, your grandfathers, grandmothers, or great-grandmothers, etc. Some people have roots in America going back several hundred years. Some people come in and they may be first generation coming into the U.S. They eventually become Americans because you have a common culture, a common legal system, a common philosophy. And if you come from another country, you accept that. And that is what it means to become American.